Here we go. Oakley dokley. Good afternoon, everyone, and a warm welcome to you all. Thank you so much for joining us during finals week. Oh, I gotta allow someone in. Hold. Here we go. Thank you so much for joining us during finals week, and to those seniors who are in attendance, I just wanted to take this moment to say congratulations. You did it. Despite the challenges the pandemic has brought, you did it. You earned your college degree, which is quite the accomplishment in and of itself, but especially now. My name is Saida Hamidi, and I work here at the Office of Global Education, which is housed within the wonderful one-stop experiential shop, Links Connect, here at CU Denver. I manage our internship programs abroad, and I'm really excited for today's town hall to discuss 2021 internship opportunities, featuring Ambassador Catherine Ebert-Grey and our diplomat in residence of the Rocky Mountain region, Scott Smith. So just a few items before we proceed. Because this is a virtual town hall, technical issues are very possible. So we appreciate your patience and understanding. If you have any questions, please know that we'll have time at the end for Q&A. And also feel free to chat your questions as they arise using the chat function below, and I'll help field them to the right person. And finally, this session is going to be recorded for those who are unable to attend at this time. We will post the recording to our Facebook page at CU Denver Study Abroad, and we'll include it with other online Links Connect resources. So at this time, it is my great pleasure to introduce our wonderful Director of Global Education, Ambassador Catherine Ebert-Grey. Ambassador, take it away. I will unmute you, and the stage is yours. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Syra. I'm so pleased to see all of you could join us today. Can you hear me okay? Very good. As you might imagine, as I wound down my appointment as ambassador last year, I started to think about the areas and opportunities where I might be able to contribute. After weeks of research, I began to seriously focus on the goals, the leadership, and the people of the University of Colorado, Denver, and Anschutz, and their serious commitment to study abroad and creating global citizens. Then when I heard Chancellor Harrell say that she took her position a few years ago because her heart and her head ganged up on her, I had to smile because I so truly felt the same way. Because, you know, living overseas for over half of my career, it was evident to me that as other nations develop students excelling in STEM fields, medicine, business, and development, we need to also assure that we retain a compatible, if not a leadership role. And to do that, we need to accentuate our effort to prepare students to perform globally. After all, 95% of the world's consumers live outside of the United States. It's so important to our national security. And due to this reality, more and more large American employers are giving credit and offering higher salaries to people who have worked or studied overseas. Fortunately, Colorado too has much to offer in today's world in research, aerospace products, mining, tourism, and services, among other areas. But I know you know that, and that's why you tuned in today. So to set the scene for what Scott's going to tell you about the Department of State and internships, you'll be interested to know that DOS, as we call it, does so much more than just issue emergency passports, although American services are the highest priority. We have embassies in almost every country in the world, which is a greater reach than any nation on earth, and that assists us in setting the global agenda. And as Scott will point out, every embassy has representation from multiple US government agencies, and some of our larger embassies, Bangkok, Berlin, Cairo, and others, have over 40 US government agencies represented because of the importance of our work. USAID, FBI, DHS, Commerce, Agriculture, Defense, the list goes on and on. So it's not just about the State Department. Over the years, the United States has contributed collectively to dramatically reducing infant mortality, increasing the number of girls in school, securing UN support for our agenda, and creating opportunities for business, not to mention active engagement and management of our relationships with some of the challenging authoritarian leaders around the world. And as Scott might mention, the combined USAID and State Department budget still only accounts for about 1% of our federal budget. So I'm exceptionally pleased to have joined the Office of Global Education this year, and I hope you'll reach out to me as you do the whole OGE team and the Career Center and advisors, and consider us a resource to help you navigate your studies abroad as well as your future career. I'm here for you. And as you complete your application for an internship with the State Department, I encourage you to select those destinations that are less traveled to increase your opportunity to be selected. And come and see me if you need me to review that or your resume and other ways where we can help you tell your own story. So thank you, Scott, for joining us, and thank you all. I look forward to working with you in the coming years.
Great. Can you guys hear me? Yeah, I see a lot of nodding heads. Okay. First of all, thank you very much for this opportunity to be with you guys today. I live like 3 blocks from your campus, and I've been here a year, and I haven't been able to connect with you guys until the ambassador actually reached out to me. And so this is actually a great opportunity. I see you every day when I walk my dog down the creek trail, and I never get in with you guys. So this is, I'm glad. I'm really happy. I want to tell you a little bit about myself, and then I'll go through a PowerPoint. I'm going to try to keep the PowerPoint relatively brief because I know that there will be questions at the end, and I want to make sure we have time for that. My name is Scott. I'm a Foreign Service Officer. I've been with the Department of State for 18 years now. For those of you that are familiar with the Department of State and the Foreign Service specifically, you know that there are a variety of career tracks that you can come in and do within the department. I happen to be a public diplomacy officer. I've spent most of my career in Latin America, and I came to Denver just this past summer to do this job in the Rocky Mountain region. And my position here is to find new talent for the department, bring them in through the internship program, fellowships that we offer, as well as the traditional job route, and then have them go all over the world and represent our country. It's a really, really cool job. It's a really cool organization. But I want to say something specific about me. I remember, I was just thinking about this the other day. When I was in college, I knew I wanted to do something international, but I had no idea what that was. Like, zero idea what that was. You can't just go to career services and say, give me the file on international where I can put my resume so that I can apply to international stuff. I mean, what does that mean? There's so much international. So I was not particularly clear on where I wanted to go. And so I have to confess, my senior year of undergrad, because I really wasn't sure, I sort of punted the decision. And I ended up applying for an exchange program that took me to Japan for a couple of years. I wasn't sure where I wanted to work, but I knew I wanted to do something international. So I kind of just kicked the can down the road, so to speak. And I had this international experience through an exchange program. And it was absolutely fantastic. It really helped me to focus a lot more. And then eventually after the program, I came back to the United States. I did my master's degree. And one of my professors at the university happened to be a retired Foreign Service officer. And that, honestly, at the age of, I think it was like 25 or 26, that was the first I had ever heard of the Foreign Service. So it's not something that everyone knows really, really well, but it's an opportunity that is out there. And you guys, having a recently retired Foreign Service officer on premises, have a unique opportunity that I can honestly tell you from just traveling here in the Rocky Mountain region, is not something that a lot of students like you have. Not a lot of people have that access. So I would really, really encourage you to take advantage of that. I'm also here, obviously, at the University of Denver based, covering the region, but you guys in-house have somebody. So I'd really, really encourage you to lean on her, ask her for, all the details about the internships, jobs, her experiences. It's really cool. It's a really cool, cool career. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and begin. Let me see if I can share my screen. Can you guys see my PowerPoint? Looks okay? All right, cool. Let me get the thing started. So we'll go through some nuts and bolts about the State Department, and then we'll get to the internships and fellowships and that sort of thing for students towards the end. An important thing to know about the Department of State is that we're looking for a diverse group of people, American citizens. All of our opportunities require US citizenship. We're looking for a diverse group with the whole the whole range of different experiences, majors, professional backgrounds to come in and work with us. What do we mean by diversity? The first thing that a lot of people think of when they hear the word diversity is they think of race, religion, ethnicity, those sorts of things. Yes, that is part of the diversity that we seek, but it's not the only thing that we're looking for in terms of a diverse workforce. What you need to remember is that the Department of State, we represent the entire world, the entirety of our country. We don't just represent part of our country. We represent the whole of the United States. And so when we think about diversity, geographic diversity is also very, very important. If we had a foreign service that was populated completely by people that went to the University of California or the University of Michigan or Florida International University, that's one part of the US, but we're not showing the entire range of what the US is and has to offer. And so we're doing ourselves a disservice. We want people from all over the country with all kinds of academic and professional backgrounds to come in. That diversity actually helps us to represent our country better overseas. The Secretary of State, I'm sure that you're all familiar with him, Mike Pompeo. He's the principal advisor to the president on foreign policy issues, coordinates it at the national level, implements the president's foreign policy. And as the ambassador kind of mentioned, protects US interests abroad. One of the important things in that particular sense is American citizen services overseas. If you've been watching the news these days, you know that literally, quite literally, tens of thousands of Americans have come back to the United States over the past several months. Not all of them, but many of them with the help of embassies and consulates overseas that are staffed with people like me and the ambassador. So looking after US interest includes US people that are overseas. There's about 14,000 foreign service employees, and they're broken into a couple of different categories, generalists and specialists. There are civil service employees, the vast majority of whom are based in the Washington, D.C. area. There are also eligible family members at our embassies and consulates overseas. So if you were to come on board as a foreign service officer and go overseas with a spouse, we have positions that are specifically earmarked for those spouses overseas. And then one thing that a lot of people don't remember is that we have thousands, tens of thousands, and many, many more locally employed staff at our embassies and consulates overseas. So if you look at the numbers, 13 or so thousand foreign service and 50,000 or so locally employed staff, you can see that the locally employed staff vastly outnumber the number of foreign service officers that we have. So this would mean, at the embassy in Sofia, Bulgaria, the Bulgarians that work there. At the embassy in Mexico City, the Mexican citizens that work there. We hire a lot of local nationals to work at our embassies and consulates. We're all over the place. 276 posts abroad, 191 countries, headquarters in Washington. To note, here locally in Denver, we do have a passport agency, which is run by the Department of State. And we also have a diplomatic security field office that's based here. So there is a small Department of State presence here in the Denver area as well. This is kind of a dense slide, and I won't linger on it too long, but I wanted to give you a snapshot of some of the opportunities when you're thinking a little bit longer term in terms of careers with the department, and then we'll segue into student programs. The department hires people in a variety of different ways. There are foreign service officer generalists, like the ambassador and I. We are generalists. We serve the majority of our careers overseas. We focus in one of the 5 areas that's in the second bullet there, the sub-bullet: consular, economic, management, political, and public diplomacy. We also hire people into the foreign service to go overseas and do a very specific job for us. That is a job that they already have the academic preparation for, that they might have several years of work experience doing, and that the Department of State is not going to teach specifically to do that job. For example, IT professionals, engineers, medical doctors, psychiatrists. These are people that have a skill set that we need overseas for our embassies and consulates and for the communities overseas. But the Department of State is not going to bring someone on board and teach that person to be a doctor. Rather, we expect that person to come on board with the MD, with several years of work experience, and then to go overseas and do that job for us. In the case of MDs, for our community overseas, for families in the foreign service that are serving overseas. So those are a couple of mostly overseas-based categories of positions, generalist and specialist. We also have civil servants, the vast majority of whom work in the Washington, D.C. area. They do work on international affairs, just like the foreign service officers do, but they don't move around the world. They're based mostly in Washington, but like I said, for example, the passport agency here, diplomatic security field office here, there are a limited number of positions around the United States as well. The Consular Fellows Program, if anyone speaks Mandarin, Portuguese, Arabic, or Spanish, or multiple of those languages, there's a specific category of full-time positions for you. And you can find out more about the Consular Fellows Program at the website, which is in the lower right-hand corner of the screen, careers.state.gov. These people work exclusively overseas. They do not work in the United States. And they work exclusively in consular positions overseas, where they will be required to use one of those languages on a day-to-day basis. And then finally, and we'll linger on the next slide for a bit, I want to talk about student programs, the focus for today. This slide, I think we'll try to share it around because hopefully the hyperlinks will work for all of you. So there's no need to worry about taking notes about where to find these things. If you want to take a picture of the slide, you're more than welcome to, but if we can get the slide shared, then you'll have the links to all of these things conveniently for you. The first thing I want to talk about, there's a whole, suffice to say, there's a lot of stuff you as a student can do with the Department of State. I'll just go in the order that we have them up here. The Foreign Affairs Information Technology Fellowship. This is a fellowship that does the following. If you are studying information technology, if you're studying cyber or something, or computer engineering or something along those lines, this program, this fellowship, will pay for 2 years of your schooling. It will provide you 2 paid summer internships with the Department of State doing IT. And upon completion of your degree, it will provide you a full-time position as a Foreign Service Officer, Information Management IT Specialist. So if you think about this, 2 years of free school, 2 paid internships, full-time job upon graduation, all in one fell swoop. That means that, for example, if you are going into your sophomore year, right? Let's say this fall, you're going to be a sophomore studying IT. If you were to apply in the fall of your sophomore year for this job, you would then know how you're going to pay for your junior and senior years, no additional student loans. You would know that you've already locked in 2 internships over the summer that are paid, and you know you already have a job waiting for you upon graduation. All of that in your sophomore year. That ain't bad. You can also use it to pay for a 2-year master's degree. So if you're a graduating senior, or if you're currently working in IT and thinking about going back to do a 2-year master's in IT, you can also apply for the same fellowship. It will pay for 2 years of school, 2 paid internships, and a job upon graduation. Similarly, the second bullet, the Pickering and Rangel Graduate School Fellowships. The structure of these programs is very, very similar to the FATE. The difference is that it is focused on a program, academic program that is not information technology, but rather something related to foreign affairs. Many people use these fellowships to study international relations, public policy, economics, something along those lines. They cannot be used to do a law degree. They cannot be used to do a degree that is not particularly related to international affairs. So English literature, for example, you won't be able to use it for a program like that. But if you're thinking about doing a master's degree, and this is exclusively at the master's level, and you want to get your 2-year master's paid for, and have those 2 paid internships, and have a guaranteed job as a Foreign Service Officer upon graduation from that master's degree, consider the Pickering and Rangel programs. One note that is extremely important about Pickering and Rangel programs. The application deadline for these programs is relatively early. It changes a little bit every year, but they are usually announced in July or August or September perhaps. And then the applications are usually due by September or October. So if you're going into your senior year, for example, then you need to be thinking in the summer before your senior year about when the application window is going to open, so that you are ready once you begin your senior year. You're ready to begin the application process and get it all lined up in time so that you can transfer seamlessly to a graduate program the year after. So the first 2 bullets are fellowships. 2 years of school paid for in each case, a couple of internships that are paid for you, and a guaranteed job upon graduation. The Rangel Summer Enrichment Program, the third program that we'll talk about briefly, this is a program that is over the summer. It's exclusively for undergraduates. And the Wrangle program allows you to come to the Washington, D.C. area for about 6 or 7 weeks over the summer to do a couple of intensive courses on international relations. It's generally hosted at Howard University in Washington, D.C. The access to practitioners of international affairs that you get through this program in Washington is phenomenal. So there is academic study involved. You will be on campus doing study, but you'll have access to a full range of people in DC that do international affairs. International affairs is much, much bigger than the State Department. It's much, much bigger than the executive branch of the federal government. It's much, much bigger, in fact, than the federal government and Congress. There are NGOs involved. There are multilateral organizations involved. There are religious organizations involved. There's all kinds of organizations that are involved in international affairs. And when you do the Wrangle Summer Enrichment Program, part of your academic study is going to be interacting with that full range of practitioners in the field of international affairs. So those first three are academic opportunities. It's important to note that for any of the opportunities that we're talking about here, be it Wrangle over the summer or some of the study abroad opportunities we're going to talk about in a little bit, you should be working really, really closely with your home school because you need to make sure that scheduling works correctly, that you're not missing anything. You know, there's money issues, there's accreditation, there's all kinds of stuff. And I do not profess to be an expert on that because each and every university around the country kind of has its own system. But I really strongly encourage you when you're thinking about international programs writ large, and especially the ones that we're talking about today, be in touch with these points of contact at your university, because it's really important to be in lockstep with the academic, financial, and other requirements that you have on campus. Okay, so let's go back to the fourth bullet, the unpaid State Department internship. These internships are the traditional kind of internship program that you might have heard of with the State Department. They are offered all over the world. They're offered in 3 different cohorts throughout a calendar year. There's a spring offering, a summer offering, and a fall offering. The spring and fall offerings, admittedly, are a little bit more difficult for full-time students to get into. I shouldn't say it that way, are a little bit more difficult in terms of managing the schedule for full-time students. Full-time students often, you know, in the fall and the spring, they're fully engaged on campus. They got a full set of courses that they're doing. You can't just get away because this is a full-time job, essentially. You can't get away to do a full-time job. If you work with your school and can make that somehow fit in your schedule, it's great to do it over the spring or the fall, because typically there's less competition, because for that very reason, there are so many students that are unable to get away. There are fewer competing for those 2 particular times of year. Many, many applications come in the summer, fewer in the spring and fall. So, okay, this unpaid internship program, what in the world does that mean? It means a couple of different things. One, they're available all over the world. They change every single year. So in one year, an embassy might request interns. The next year, the embassy might not request interns. It changes constantly. But suffice to say, there will be opportunities pretty much all over the place, and a lot in the Washington, D.C. area as well. One very important thing to remember about the unpaid State Department internship is that first word, unpaid. That's a challenge, and we recognize that's a challenge. Sometimes working with your school, some schools, I know the University of Denver, for example, has certain programs that can help to defer some of the costs of doing unpaid internships. I don't know the case of the University of Colorado here. You'd have to talk to the people there on campus to make sure. I don't want to promise anything on behalf of the school because I can't do that. But I do know that many schools recognize that the value of an unpaid internship is still there, but that it's a challenge for students, and therefore they have mechanisms set up to attempt to help students come into these programs. So keep in mind it is unpaid. That said, though, I really, really think the internship with the State Department is an amazing, amazing opportunity. It does look really, really good on your resume. I can promise you from 18 years of experience, and I would wager that the ambassador has similar experience without putting words in her mouth, but I bet she's going to say the same thing. The interns don't just make coffee and make Xeroxes. Never. I shouldn't say never, because I, as a Foreign Service officer, make coffee and make Xerox copies once in a while, right? We all have to do it. But it is not the focus of the internship. Let me give you a very concrete example of an intern that I worked with when I was in Guatemala. This is about 10, 12 years ago. 10, 12 years ago, if you think back, well, you guys are very, very young, but I can remember a time when social media was still very new. 10 or 12 years ago, we were trying to wrap our brains around what in the world is this social media stuff? What does it mean? Is it important? Do we care? Should we be using this at the embassy? It was kind of the wild, wild west. Nobody really knew what the heck was going on because it was all new, right? So this intern from University of Michigan came down to Guatemala. He had great Spanish, which is the reason I actually asked him to come down. Came down, and I was working in the public affairs section. I was the press officer, which means that my job is to communicate with Guatemalans, you know, with the local media, et cetera, et cetera. Well, social media is part of that, right? But I have no idea, what is this thing, this Twitter thing you speak of? What is this Facebook you speak of? This mysterious blue sort of icon that shows up on my desktop sometimes. What the heck is that? He came down, and actually he was an early adopter of technology. One of the first people, you know, to have an iPhone, that sort of thing. And he had a really good grasp of what this stuff was and could do. And so in my initial conversation with him, when he came to post, I said, look, Ryan was the guy's name. Ryan, like, I don't understand what any of this means, but it seems to me you're with us for about 10 weeks. You have an interest in this. My bet is you could probably dig into this a little bit and we could make some kind of project out of it. I don't know what that means yet because we're going to have to work through it, but is that something you'd like to work on? Sure, he said, absolutely. So we worked together to come up with the following project, which is what he did over his summer, 10-week internship at the embassy in Guatemala. First, he spent a couple of weeks just kind of trolling, for lack of a better way of saying it, poking around on the internet, seeing what's going on in Guatemala, who's using social media, who's on Facebook, what are they talking about? Are any of those things of interest to the United States? And if so, do we see any way to leverage, to wedge our way into that conversation? I mean, we didn't know. We still had no idea what this meant. We were really just feeling our way around in the dark. So after a couple of weeks, he came to me with his findings. And it seemed to the two of us talking together that there were a couple of people who were super, super active on social media, blogging specifically, in Guatemala, that were talking about things like immigration and some other stuff that, the United States we care about that. That's important in our integrated country strategy in this country. So he said, so I think there's people talking about stuff. I think there's an opportunity for us to get involved somehow, but it's still really raw here in Guatemala. It's still really new. And I said, okay, well, what do you think? What do you think? I just asked him, what do you think? And he said, look, what I think is this. I think it would be really cool if we could invite 5, 6 of these people to come to the embassy. We hold like a lunch. We host them for lunch. We get them around a table, in a conference room, and just get them to talk about social media and what's going on in that environment in Guatemala. Then we might be surprised what we can parse out of that. So he did that. So I gave him a little bit of our budget, and he organized the whole thing. So he reached out to these individuals, he invited them, he worked with the security office at the embassy to make sure that they could be permitted into embassy premises, because that's a thing, you have to make sure that they're allowed. He worked with the caterer, he worked with the general services office who deals with setup in the embassy to make sure that we had the appropriate room with all the AV. He put together a very brief PowerPoint presentation about the social media landscape in the United States as a kickoff, kind of as a thing that we would start the lunch with in order to get conversation going. And then we just said, look, we're going to wind it up and watch it go. We have no idea what's going to happen. Great. So he did all that. So all these folks show up, he gets the whole thing organized, and the conversation was phenomenal. We listened to these people, we listened to things about, challenges with information technology access and education. We listened to their recommendations about, this is where people are talking about things that might be of interest to you guys. You should be in those conversations. It was just this comprehensive look at information technology, social media in Guatemala from practitioners, right? So we got out of there feeling pretty triumphant. We clean up the room, we throw away the empty soda cans and all that stuff. And I said, okay, that's awesome. Here's what I think, Ryan. So we go back to my office, and I said, here's 2 things I think that need to happen. One is, I think we need to write this up and we need to send it back to Washington, because I've not seen any cables, which are kind of official communications, from or to Washington about social media in Central America. And I think there are people in the in DC to be super interested in what just happened here. And he said, yeah, that'd be great. I said, look, here's how we're gonna do it. So we had to sit down and talk about how we write cables, what's important, what's not important, you know, how you grab somebody's attention, don't make it 47 pages long, the whole thing. State Department writing, right? So we spent some time on that. Did it, and of course it had to get cleared by the ambassador because everything goes out under the ambassador's name. So we get it up to the ambassador for clearance, and we had this kind of gruff, nice guy, but kind of gruff ambassador in Guatemala at the time. And my phone rings, and I'm, Scott, come up here. I want to talk to you about this cable. This is what I hear. Rah, kind of that kind of thing. Okay, so I go running up the stairs, and he said, you know, this cable is great. I have a couple of recommendations. We should tweak this. Could you expand that? Let's get rid of this. This doesn't matter. He made it better, right? Fantastic. Took it downstairs to Ryan, and we tweaked it. We got it edited. We sent it back up to him, and he said, yeah, that's cool. Send it out. Great. Send it to Washington. Washington fell in love. Like it was insane. People in the public affairs sphere, you know, wrote back to us and said, we have not seen anything like this anywhere around the world. This is amazing. You know, people that work specifically on Guatemala issues came back and said, this is unbelievable. We've now found a niche where we can get specific messages out. This is so cool. Rah, rah, rah. What Ryan didn't know was that in the conversation with the editing portion, right, where I was called up to the ambassador's office, the ambassador said, could you actually talk to me a little bit more in depth about this? I really don't know that I understand it completely. Let's get this cable out. I want to get it out, but I'd like to have a more kind of a deeper conversation about it. And I said, okay, cool. And so in my mind, I thought, guess what Ryan's next task is? It's literally to brief the ambassador about what we learned. So I went back down, we did the cable, got that out. And so we're thinking, he's thinking, Ryan's thinking, great, we're on our victory lap, right? Not yet, my friend. We still got about 8 days before you get back on the plane, and ain't nothing free. So guess what we're doing for the next 8 days? So I tell Ryan, we're going to go up and brief the ambassador. He's like, great, I'll pull up all the information. I can get it ready for you. And I said, that word you, no, not me, you, Ryan Lincoln, you are going to brief the ambassador. I will be there with you. We will go over this a number of times before we walk into his office because I don't want you to feel like you are unprepared. But believe me, you are prepared. I know you are. And we're going to go in and do this. And so we did. So we spent a couple of days tweaking the briefing. We went upstairs. Ryan led the briefing. It was amazing. And then he got on a plane and went back and finished his undergrad. That's the internship. There's no coffee. There's no Xeroxes. This is communicating policy to Washington, communicating opportunity to Washington, making sure that our leadership understands an issue and why it matters. The guy that I worked with, this intern, did all of that. I just led the way, but he did it. That's what the internship is. So I would strongly encourage you to consider this if and when you can get it to fit into your schedule. And then I'm going to kind of race through the next ones because I've already talked a lot more than I intended to. Boren scholarships and critical language scholarships, these are opportunities to study language with someone else paying for that study and being overseas while doing it. I know that at your school you have points of contact that know about Boren and critical languages, so I'd strongly recommend that you get in touch there locally. These are not just the typical Spanish, German, French type languages. We're talking like Kazakh, Bengali, Farsi, like really cool opportunities, and somebody else pays for it. So take a look at Boren and critical languages. The Virtual Student Federal Service. The Virtual Student Federal Service, I'm proud to say, is a virtual internship that actually started under Hillary Clinton at the Department of State, but was so successful, it's now been adopted by several dozen federal agencies. So we piloted it and perfected the model, and it was so good that the rest of the US government is now using it. The Virtual Student Federal Service, you can literally just Google that and the page will come up. This is an internship that will allow you to work for about 10 hours a week, so it's not full-time. Unpaid State Department internship is full-time, 40 hours a week. Virtual Student Federal Service is 10 hours a week and you don't have to go anywhere. It's virtual. So right now, one of my tasks on my to-do list is I need to go into this and draft what I would like a Virtual Student Federal Service intern to do with me in the coming year. And I will post that by, I think, the 1st or 2nd of June is when I have to have it in there. And all of the foreign service officers around the world are invited. So everyone around the world right now is looking at this. Those will all get posted late June, early July, at which point you, as the student who might be interested in this, can go online, take a look at what projects are available, and apply project to project if you want. It doesn't cost you anything. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to pack a suitcase. All you have to do is make sure that you have an active and good internet connection and an interest in the project. You'll probably have to interview for the project because these are competitive. But then for a year, it's for an academic year, you do this internship directly with a State Department person. That person might be in Nairobi. That person might be in Paris. That person might be in, I don't even know where, Uruguay, anywhere. All over the world this is offered. So think about it, because it's a relatively easy way to get connected and do something that time-wise and in terms of logistics is a little bit easier than the actual unpaid student internship. And the final one is just a general study abroad opportunities. There are a ton. If you go to exchanges.state.gov, and hopefully you get the slide with the hyperlinks on it, there are many, many opportunities for US citizens that the State Department offers to study abroad. Always coordinate that with your local school. And then finally, if you want to just take a picture of this, or you can just take it from the PowerPoint deck if it gets circulated later, there's my email address, there's my Facebook handle. The Calendly link is my kind of office hours. So I schedule 30-minute increment one-on-ones with people. If you want to talk about whatever, go ahead and go on there and you can find availability. Just click a time that works for you and it'll automatically populate into my calendar. The enterprise level, so the State Department's LinkedIn is also a resource for you about internships, but also about jobs more broadly. And then the QR code on the left-hand side of the panel of the slide. That QR code, and I'll put the URL in the chat after I close this box. The QR code will take you to a registration site that is specific to this event for the State Department. Why does that matter? When you register via that QR code, it will ask you very basic things like what's your name, what's your email address, what school do you go to, what are you interested in? Once you've registered in that system, when opportunities become available, the system will automatically generate information and send it to you. So for example, if you're thinking about applying for the internship and you go in there and say, hey, I'm interested in the internship. When the internship application window opens, you will automatically, by virtue of having signed up, get an email alerting you, hey, you said you're interested in internships. The internship thing is now open. Also, I use it, that's kind of an automatic thing, but I also use it when I have stuff that I want to do. Like, for example, we're looking for Portuguese speakers. That's one of the things that we're recruiting for. And so, I don't know, 6 months ago, I went in there and everyone who had registered via those QR codes and said that they have Portuguese, I just pulled them all up, do a search by Portuguese. And then I emailed them all and I said, hey, do you guys want to do a Facebook Live to talk about how you can use Portuguese to get a job at the Department of State? And a lot of people were like, yeah, that sounds great. So I sent out a survey monkey, like which dates and time work for you. We figured it out. I took the one that had the best response, did a Facebook Live, and we talked about it. So the only way I can get in touch with you is if you register via the QR code. You can always get in touch with me by email and Calendly and all that other stuff. But for me to reach you, that's the only way. And so if you're interested, I'd strongly recommend that you do that. So I am going to attempt to stop sharing my screen, and then we can open this up to questions or whatever else you guys would like to talk about.
I think the ambassador had a few remarks. Let me unmute her. Thank you so much, Scott. That was fantastic. Let me unmute Catherine.
Scott, thank you for that great overview. I actually learned a few little things myself, and I'm sure you're going to hear from some of us at the university. I promise you all we will get his PowerPoint out to you, and he and I will be a resource or find the answers for you. But before we go on to Q&A, I just wanted to say a word about our study abroad program at the university. It's alive and very active. In fact, we have a very impressive program in Beijing you may have heard about. This is exceptional experience and opportunity for you. We're adding some additional components in the coming few months to make it even all the more attractive. And in many ways, this opportunity can be less costly than what your student costs are at the university sitting here in Denver, because we have special incentives and scholarship funds that are available for you to go to Beijing. So I encourage you to look at that very closely. We also have a semester in Berlin that'll be coming up sometime in the next year. That's another great opportunity to see a lot of Europe and to study a course right there in Berlin. We also are working with many of you I see that are on our committees at the OGE office. We're expecting to have over a dozen programs roll out beginning in 2021. And these are all over the world. We're hoped by then that we're going to have health procedures in place that will be going forward with these trips. But all you have to do is go to our website and ask for an appointment with an advisor at the OGE office, and we'll tell you much more about study abroad. I can encourage you more because having this experience before you go out in the workplace makes you all the more competitive. So thanks again, Scott. Over to you, Syra.
Thank you, Catherine. Yeah, I just wanted to say this is just a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much for taking the time. Scott mentioned the Boren, the CLS. I just wanted to say the critical language scholarships and the Boren. And I just want to let everyone know that the study abroad advisors are still on hand. You can schedule an appointment with us. We're happy to meet with you via Zoom. We've had students receive the Boren and get accepted to the critical language scholarships program in the past, in the recent past. And so we are here to help advise you on your applications. And as Catherine mentioned, we have some really wonderful upcoming opportunities to include virtual opportunities, both for study abroad and to do internships abroad. So keep your eye out on our website for that, ucdenver.edu/study abroad. So at this time, I would like to open the virtual floor for questions. If folks have questions, feel free to chat it in the box, or if you want to give me an indication, I'll unmute you, whatever you want to do. Sydney Berry, hold. Let me get you unmuted, Sydney. There you go.
Is housing provided with the unpaid Department of State internships? Question for Scott. Whoever would know.
Hold on, unmuting Scott. Scott, are you unmuted?
Now I think I'm unmuted. Can you guys hear me? Okay. So good question on the housing. The simple answer is officially, no, it is not provided. The unofficial answer is that oftentimes when you're overseas, posts will be able to work with you to find a solution. Let me give you a concrete example of that. As you probably know, or maybe you might not know, the transfer season for foreign service officers, because we only serve 2 to 3 years usually in a specific post, we transfer every couple, 3 years, and it usually happens over the summer. When we are overseas, our housing is organized and paid for usually by the department. So what that means is if I leave a post in June and the successor isn't coming in until August, there's a house that's kind of open. But the government, we're still going to pay for it because we're not going to give the lease back to the landlord for 2 months and then try to recuperate the housing. So there's oftentimes empty housing that's overseas, and it's great if we can use that for interns. It's never a promise. I want to be very, very clear. It is not part of the program, but it's super helpful in terms not only of it's one less cost the interns have to think about, but it also helps us know the interns are in a safe part of town, in a building that we have faith in, that we feel is secure and safe. And this is very, very important for us while we're overseas. So the simple answer, no. The more complicated answer, though, is maybe.
Thank you, Scott. So we've got 2 questions in the chat, and then I see that Amanda also has her hand up. So let me ask, we've got a few questions. Here we go. Okay, thank you for the very helpful information. 2 questions. This is from Hamilton. Thank you, Hamilton. First, what should students who are graduating this Saturday, congratulations, do if they want to pursue work with the DOS? Is it too late to get involved? Second, well, let's just stop there, and then I'll ask the second question. Scott, oh, sorry. Hold, Scott. Unmute. Are you unmuted?
Okay, now I think I am.
Okay.
Yeah? Okay. No, the answer is no, it's not too late. Many of our foreign service, many of our State Department positions are open year-round. Others, there's specific application windows, but it's constantly, there's something open all the time. So I encourage you to take a look at careers.state.gov to see what's open. One super important thing. Remember when we were talking about the Wrangell and Pickering fellowships and the fact that those applications are due very, very early, right? Similar thing with Department of State positions. The timeline for hiring is not from one week to the next. It's not like you just drop a resume, get a phone call, do an interview, and all of a sudden you're living in Bangkok. It's a little bit more complicated than that. So you need to keep the timeline in mind. For foreign service, we often encourage people to think about 8, 10, 12 months out. It's very difficult to predict because most of that depends on the security clearance, and the security clearance is different for every single person. But just realize if you're graduating relatively quickly, this is something you're going to need to look at for a little bit longer term and not for the immediate sort of summer time frame.
Great, thanks. I'll keep you unmuted if that's okay, because there's a lot of questions here, I think, for you. We have many international students at CU Denver. What is the best way for these students to find out more and how to gain a U.S. embassy position back in their home countries?
Yeah, so the best,
sorry, additional DOS resources for exploring those positions.
So for international students who want to return to their home country and maybe think about working for the Department of State overseas, the best place to do that is quite literally just the embassy's website. In my experience around the world, the job posting page on the embassy website is one of the most visited pages on any embassy's website anywhere around the world. So they are constantly changing and vary country to country, but that is kind of your one-stop shopping for looking for opportunities back in your home country.
Thank you, Scott. And we're going to take Andrew Blanco's question, and then I'm going to kick it over to Amanda, who had a question also. How can we best prepare for the FSO test?
Okay, there we go. So the best answer to that is go to the library, read every book, and remember everything. That's the best answer. That's not the most realistic answer. The most realistic answer, honestly, is it really depends on each candidate. I'd say take a look at the website, first of all, to familiarize yourself with what all is covered on the Foreign Service Officer test, the FSOT. And then there are a number of practice tests, which essentially are old tests that have just been rotated out, that are available to you on the website and also on the app. The app is DOS Careers. So you'll start to see kind of what all we look for in the written portion. What I'd encourage you to do is carve out, a little bit of time on a Saturday or something like that. Spend some time going through those questions. And as you're going through the questions that make you stop and go, ooh, I don't know if I feel real good about this topic, make a note to yourself. There are going to be some topics that you never note. For example, if you're an economics major, my guess is when you come to the econ questions on this test, you're probably not going to have a whole lot of difficulty, is my guess. But you might have more difficulty with US history questions or geography questions or something like that. As you're noting those things where you felt, ooh, I don't know about this, I'm a little bit nervous about that answer, take that, and my guess is you're going to see kind of the same thing come up consistently or relatively consistently. It really looks to me like I got to beef up on my Constitution. I don't understand the Constitution. Okay, read the Constitution. Or you can go to the careers.state.gov website, and when you go to the top on the landing page, there's a link that says, I think it's downloads. You click on that, and it's all these PDFs. One of the PDFs is a reading list. Click on that, and it's a whole reading list. I do not necessarily recommend that you read every book on the reading list. If you want to and have the desire, sure, great, fantastic. But take a look at those topics that you really didn't feel so strong, and then at the list, those topics will have a series of books underneath them that you might use as reference.
Great, thank you, Scott. Let's keep you unmuted, and I'm going to unmute Amanda. Hold, unmuting Amanda, who had a question, and then Scott, I'll unmute you also. Go ahead.
First, I just want to thank the ambassador and Mr. Smith for doing this little conversation with us. It's super awesome. So my question is, I'm planning to attend law school after I complete my undergrad, and I'm not sure who would maybe know more information about it, but I just wanted to know if there are many opportunities for people who've completed their JD to work with the State Department, and if that's something the State Department is kind of actively looking for, or if it's better to take a different route.
Yeah, so a couple of things on that. First of all, if you're thinking about the Foreign Service Officer General's jobs, like the job that I do, there's no specific academic background that's required or disqualified. Any academic background is fine. So if you wanted to come into the Foreign Service and you have a background in law, sure, that's fine. You still have to take the test and go through the process just like everyone else, but there's no inherent there's no checklist like, oh, she has a law degree, so yes, she qualifies for the Foreign Service. That's not the case at all. Academic background doesn't really matter. You need to get through the intake process. We do have a bureau back in Washington called the L Bureau, which is legal affairs. They do hire people. Those positions, though, would be almost exclusively in DC. I'm not aware of any that are anywhere else. There might be, but I'm not aware of any. And they are really limited in number. So you're talking about a super, super competitive pool, a lot of people interested for not many jobs. So that's kind of what I would say. For Foreign Service, absolutely fantastic. If you really want to do legal stuff, L would be your entree, but realize that the numbers are pretty small.
Great. We have another question. Does working for the government enable students to receive loan forgiveness?
Yes, and that's a great thing to talk about. So a little inside baseball, bureaucratic, secret, super insider knowledge. Don't tell anybody, even though we're recording this and it's going to go online. So the deal is, you might have seen in the news that the federal government was considering cutting funding for the student loan repayment program, whereby, if you graduated and you went into a federal government job and you had certain criteria, you could apply for money to send back to Sallie Mae to help pay off, right? That program for the federal government level is different from the program that we have. It's a totally different issue. So if that disappears, we have very cleverly incorporated into our budget a pool of money that is protected because it's in our budget. It's not dependent on the federal government writ large. So that can always change, budgets change, right? But as of today, that money exists. You do need to serve as a Foreign Service officer in kind of a hardship tour. So in other words, to qualify for this, you don't just get to move to Paris and then to Oslo and then to Berlin and then to Rome. You're looking at maybe Kampala or, I don't know, Ciudad Juarez, like these more difficult, challenging Foreign Service posts. So not everyone qualifies. But as long as you're in a Foreign Service position that's in one of those posts, and those posts are clearly labeled, I mean, you'll see them in the system, which ones qualify, apply and get free money. I did it for my first 3 years in the Foreign Service, and I got boom, 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 checks that just went directly to Sallie Mae. And so, I was making a payment monthly at this level, and then this money sneaks in, and suddenly, boom, they recalculate, and my monthly payment goes down to this. And then it goes down to the next level, and finally, it was magically gone for doing nothing more than showing up at a place that I wanted to be anyway because it was the top of my bid list. So that ain't bad. So yeah, I encourage you to take a look at the student loan repayment program.
Great, thank you. I wish I did that. Okay, so now I have another question about, which form of Portuguese is being recruited?
Both continental and Brazilian Portuguese. That said, though, the need that we have in terms of where we need to send these people is going to be in Brazil. So you can come with continental Portuguese or with Brazilian Portuguese, either is fine, but know that you're going to be sent to Brazil to do the Consular Fellows program.
Thank you. And if there's anyone who's raising their hand, I can't actually see everyone on one screen, so I'm just taking a quick peek. Okay, I have another question. Let's say I was currently employed in the federal sector with competitive career conditional status, and the consular fellow program sounds best for me. Will I be able to keep my status if selected for the fellowship, and who negotiates my entrance on duty?
That's a really good question, and I honestly don't know the answer to that question. Typically, that competitive eligibility does not come into play with the consular fellows or with the Foreign Service, with any of those jobs. Our intake process is the intake process. It's an accepted kind of service, and so we don't have that non-competitive eligibility come into play. Now that said, the Consular Fellows program is limited. It's what's called a limited non-career appointment. It's a maximum of 5 years that you can do the program. It will not be 5 years in one day. It is 5 years and that's it. So the question is, if you come in with that non-competitive eligibility and do this for 5 years, will it still exist on the other end? I honestly don't know. I could ask a point of contact in Washington. If you want to send me an email just so I can get it back to you directly, I'd be happy to do it. But honestly, I don't know the answer to that question. And there was a second part to that question, which I've now forgotten.
I will tell you that second part. That second part is, okay, will I be Will I be able to keep my status if selected for the fellowship, and who negotiates my entrance on duty?
I guess it depends on what you mean by negotiate your entrance on duty. I don't really understand what that means. If you want to clarify in the chat box, let us know, but I don't know what you're negotiating. You're negotiating the date, you're negotiating the salary, you're negotiating the posting. Like, what do you mean by negotiating?
I will keep an eye out for clarification here. Got another question. When an administration comes in that you feel you are morally opposed to, how do you deal with working in that kind of environment?
So this is a good question. And, you know, I've worked under 3 different presidents. People, you know, have worked, depending on how long your career is, it can be upwards of 5 or 6 different presidents. I promise you, I don't care if the person is a president of the United States or your spouse or your next door neighbor. Is there anyone you have ever met in your entire life that you have agreed 100% with everything? Even if it's like the toilet paper goes this way or that way. Everything else is the same, but the toilet paper makes us crazy, right? It doesn't happen. We don't agree always. So the question then is going to be, and it's a really good question, you know that your job coming on board is to represent and advocate for the policy. I, as Scott, don't make up the policy. The policy comes down from the president, I mean, with informed kind of data from below, but it comes down from the president. And so my job is, that's the job. So the question for each individual person is going to be, am I able to overcome maybe something that I hold very dear morally or ethically or whatever it is, politically, in order to advocate and support something that I know I diametrically do not agree with? And that's a challenge, but that's the job. So I can tell you that there are people who have resigned over decades. It might be over a war, it might be over a specific funding decision or an immigration decision or something like that. People who feel so strongly about an issue that they cannot square that circle internally, knowing that they have to go to work to support something they disagree with that deeply. So it's a question that we all have to ask ourselves. At the end of the day, you know, sure, I've gone out and had to advocate or support things that I know that maybe if it were on the ballot as a yes or no, do you support this or not, I wouldn't support. But my job is to support the United States of America. That's my job. I'm trying to get a win for the USA. And the USA has elected these people that are now making this policy. So, okay, that's what I'm going to do, because that's why I'm being paid. And at the end of the day, don't forget, it's for your country. This is bigger than just an individual. You're doing this for your country.
Thank you so much, Scott. We are at 1 o'clock. I want to be mindful and respectful of everyone's time. Thank you so much. There are a couple of questions that I wasn't able to address, some sent to me privately. So if there are some that the study abroad office knows the answers to, we'll reach out to you and respond. If there are some here that are specifically for Scott, so please, I encourage you all to schedule a 30-minute block with Scott via the Calendly link that you sent out. I will follow up with everyone and send you a copy of the PowerPoint that was presented. And thank you so very much. This was our first town hall like this, and I really appreciate everyone coming out, and a special thanks to Scott Smith and to our ambassador, Catherine Ebert-Grey. Thank you so very much, and I will conclude the town hall. Thanks again.
Okay, thanks guys, bye.
Congratulations, seniors.